Hello, all my movie-loving maniacs. I wanted to try something new and give you these little deep dive videos on various topics, and since I've recently revisited the Barbershop series, I thought I'd give you a deep dive on this franchise, its legacy, and if it has a future or if it's good where it stands. This is Lassiter Factor's Deep Dive. So this franchise started with one man by the name of Ice Cube. Rapper, actor, the man up until this movie came out had already made a big name for himself in the music and film industry. His most notable film that is most important to his career is Friday. That film is so iconic it spawned two sequels, Next Friday and Friday After Next, which hey, the third film is about to celebrate its 20th anniversary, so it might warrant a franchise deep dive. But there is another film that is important to his film career, and that is Barbershop. I remember this actually being my first exposure to Ice Cube, because around this time I was transitioning from quote-unquote kid stuff to more adult stuff, so I wasn't really aware of his music or any of his films prior to this. But when I saw this back in 2002, I liked it. I thought it was funny and was even more fun to watch over and over again. This film was a huge hit when it came out, and of course, a huge hit among black folks because it particularly resonated with us. It's basically a story that took place over the course of one day and centered around this barbershop in Chicago and the people who worked in it. Those people were played by recognizable faces among black folks. Of course, you had Ice Cube playing Calvin, who is the owner of the barbershop after it was passed down to him after his father passed away. He loves the barbershop, but it also came with some financial failures and had aspirations outside of it. So he decided to sell the barbershop to a shady businessman played by Keith David. But then throughout the film, he starts to realize how much the shop not only means to him, but the people that work there and his community as a whole. And that was something that was brought home even further by the Eddie character played by Cedric the Entertainer. And it is something we as black folks can relate to because everybody at some point in time had that one barbershop that you and your dad would always go to and you knew everybody there. Or as Eddie himself said in the movie,
our own country club.
And because of that, it drives home the message of the film, which is how important a barbershop can be because sometimes the little things can change the course of somebody's life, such as Calvin's dad always giving free haircuts to this one kid. Now Calvin has to deal with this kid, but the kid promises to pay him back after this job interview. Near the end of the film, he keeps up that promise after he got the job, but Calvin says, keep the money. The other characters in the film also make this movie because they all have their own unique personalities, which is something that you would always find in a barbershop, which makes the characters unique. You got Eddie, played by Cedric the Entertainer. He is this old barber that has been working at the barbershop for years, and Cedric brought his comedic A-game to the character, but also served in the end as the moral compass for Calvin. You got Terry, played by Eve, who was at the height of her rap career in one of her earlier films. And while it's not a particularly groundbreaking role for her, she did a good job at playing an angry, loud woman who has been cheated on, and she also has to deal with the fact that she is the only female barber there. Michael Ealy plays Ricky, who is a former criminal but trying to turn his life around, but his life and even the people he associates himself with keeps coming back to bite him in the ass. But he got people like Calvin in his corner looking out for him. Sean Patrick Thomas plays Jimmy, who is a college student that works there, but is a bit full of himself because he is more educated than everybody that works there. I do like his conflict with Isaac, played by Troy Garrity, who is basically a white boy that acts black, and Jimmy calls him out on it, but Isaac calls Jimmy out on being more black than he is, but their story wraps up when Isaac gives him a haircut that is just as good as a black barber, and the two come to an understanding about each other. This film also has the nerve to have a MacGuffin that works, and it is an ATM that is stolen by these two guys played by Anthony Anderson and Lorenz Tate, little brother. And if this reaction from Anthony Anderson isn't the funniest thing ever. That story gets intertwined with the characters at the barbershop, which is why the film works, because it is about all these characters and how their stories intertwine with this barbershop and this ATM. This film was directed by Tim Story, who would go on to make movies like Taxi, Think Like a Man 1 and 2, Ride Along 1 and 2, Shaft 2019, the Tom and Jerry movie that came out last year, and the two movies that he is most known for, which is Fantastic Four and its sequel, Fantastic Four Rise of Silver Surfer. Make of that what you will, but despite his hit-or-miss track record, that first Barbershop will always, in my opinion, be my favorite film of his, and as far as I'm concerned, the best in the series. That's why I gave Barbershop the hands up emoji, because it is a masterpiece. So the first movie being the big hit that it was, naturally a sequel was in the works, called Barbershop 2 Back in Business, which came out in February of 2004 and directed this time by Kevin Rodney Sullivan, who is primarily known for directing a bunch of TV shows, though he did direct Guess Who and hasn't made a feature-length film ever since. Me personally, I remember liking this film when I saw it back then, but even I could tell something was just missing. Like, for one, this film does not take place over the course of one day, which I get why they did. They didn't want to follow the formula of the first one, but in doing that, you kind of take away what made the first film work, which is simplifying it to one day. But despite that, I felt the movie was still good, and unlike the first film, it had something to say about gentrification. In this movie, a newer and more hip barbershop is about to open across the street from them, which might take away some of their customers. In the midst of all that, the area is being changed up as well. That was the main plot, but of course you had other characters in their own stories, such as Terry trying to be more chill and level-headed, but people keep testing her. Then she started to fall for Ricky, which spits in the face of Dinka, which is a character from the first film I did forget to mention. Dinka is Nigerian and has a crush on Terry, and that story and plot does work into Terry's story in the film, and she does start to feel for Dinka. But when it came to the sequel, I think the filmmakers realized there is nothing much they can do with that, and plus it will make more sense if Terry started to have a thing for Ricky. And they just gave Dinka this nice Nigerian woman he falls for from the hair salon down the street, which I will get into in a bit. We also see these flashbacks of Eddie back in his younger days. We see his relationship with Calvin's dad and how much Eddie means to the barbershop, plus this woman he had a relationship with. Jimmy is starting his career in politics. Isaac moved up in the barbershop as one of the best, and he starts to feel himself. Then they introduce Gina, played by Queen Latifah, who was on an all-time acting high after her Oscar nomination for Chicago. At this point in the franchise, they was trying to spin off her character in her own movie, which I will get into shortly. But I get what they were trying to do. They was trying to have representation for hair salons the same way that first film had representation for actual barbershops. Plus, Gina had one of the funniest moments in the movie where her and Cedric go back and forth with each other, and they just nail it with the comedy, and it is the first time the world is exposed to the acting talents of Keke Palmer. Just saying, though. And it is the first, but wouldn't be the last time she worked with both Queen Latifah and Ice Cube. Overall, the sequel had pure intentions and does maintain the comedic aspect from the first film, but it just didn't have the magic of that first film. Regardless, I still gave Barbershop 2 Back in Business the hard eyes emoji. The next year, Beauty Shop was released in the spring of 2005 and is directed by Billy Woodruff, who is primarily known for making music videos, dipped his hands in directing TV shows here and there, but prior to this movie, he made the cult hit Honey. But since then, he's made nothing but straight-to-video sequels like Bring It On 5, Drumline 2, and Honey 2 and 3. Make of all that what you will. But Beauty Shop follows Gina, played once again by Queen Latifah, as she tries to start her own beauty shop. But for the most part, this film tries to follow some of the tropes that made Barbershop work by giving us characters with their own unique character traits, like Alfie Woodard as the older hairstylist, Golden Brooks as the more standoffish and angry one. Sherry Shepherd is pregnant in the movie, which is the only trait I can think of for this character. Bryce Wilson plays James, who is that one dude in the hair salon you are not sure is gay or not, which is played up for laughs at times, but not always in a good way. I do like that this cast is more diverse than the Barbershop films, but some of them range from either embarrassed or out of place in this film, such as Kevin Bacon in a wig and weird accent, and he feels the most out of place in this movie. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying Kevin Bacon can't do comedy, but even for Kevin Bacon, this seems a bit much. Alicia Silverstone plays Lynn, who is the token white girl that Gina befriends from her old salon before starting her own. And the joke with her character is she is trying hard to be black. This is the one I feel just seemed embarrassed to be there. Her career just never recovered from Batman and Robin, and I guess she was just trying any role. Mina Savari and Andy McDowell are the only non-black actors I feel didn't really feel embarrassed or out of place in this film. To me, they have always been the type of actors that just got in where they fit in. The roles they played I thought were just fine, especially Mina Savari, who was essentially a character meant to drive the plot, and Andy McDowell, to her credit, was funny and cute to watch interact with the black characters. In the end, Beauty Shop I will say was a noble effort, but lacks the magic and restraint the Barbershop films had that made them unique and funny. This film was considered a box office disappointment, making $37 million against a $25 million budget, barely making its budget back. Maybe this film does have its fans that I don't know about, but if it does, more power to you. I'm glad you were able to find some enjoyment in Beauty Shop. I did at times too, but it stands as the lowest in the series. That's why I gave Beauty Shop the shoulder shrug emoji. I don't dislike it, but I don't like it either. Before I get into the third and until further notice, final Barbershop movie, I gotta at least mention the Barbershop TV series, which ran on Showtime for one season. I never watched the Barbershop series, but from what I read and looked up, it just looked like the show was trying to keep the Barbershop train going, with new actors playing the characters, so it just felt like the dollar store version of the movies. Okay, let me stop. They had Omar Gooding playing Calvin, so I will at least put some respect on his name. I like Omar Gooding, especially in the movie Baby Boy. Overall, I heard the show was just not that good to begin with anyway, and you probably forgot that there was a Barbershop TV series. So, moving on. Finally, in 2016, Barbershop The Next Cut was released and directed by Malcolm D. Lee, who, fun fact, is the cousin of Spike Lee and has made such classics as Undercover Brother, Roll Bounce, Girls Trip, and Space Jam: A New Legacy. And he also made Scary Movie 5. And whatever, I say he made those for a paycheck. But anyways, Malcolm D. Lee is also known for the franchise that is most important to his career, and that is The Best Man, which is a classic in its own right and spawned the sequel, The Best Man Holiday, which I thought was a lot better than I expected it to be. And currently, Malcolm D. Lee is shooting The Best Man, the final chapters right now, which is set to be released, I guess, sometime next year. And I can't wait for that. But here I thought Malcolm D. Lee was the best man, no pun intended, to bring back the Barbershop series because he already did it with The Best Man Holiday, and I thought he did it excellently with Barbershop The Next Cut. I remember I saw this in the theater 6 years ago. It was one of my favorite films of 2016. I've loved it because it maintained what made the other films work, but also improving. It maintained the comedy by adding in the recession, and the only way Calvin could survive post-recession is doing a joint business with a hair salon. So it adds this element of battle of the sexes with the conversations they have with each other. Some are fun, some are preachy, and heavy-handed, but that's an element from the second film that worked. Plus, they brought in the Chicago gang wars, which went hand in hand with Calvin and his son Jalen, played by Baby Ghost himself, Michael Rainey Jr., who is that little baby we see Calvin change the diaper in the second film. This is an element I thought worked for Calvin's story and why he wants to open up a new shop on the north side of Chicago. Other than Ice Cube, some more returning cast include Cedric, Sean Patrick Thomas, Jasmine Lewis, Eve, but Michael Ealy and Leonard Earl Howes don't return as Ricky and Dinka. I don't know why Michael Ealy didn't return for this movie, but he couldn't have been too busy. Some new cast members include Nicki Minaj, Erdkash Ambakard, bring some much-needed diversity. J.B. Smooth, Lamar Morris, and Common, which blew my mind because, unlike Ice Cube, is an actual Chicago native. And Cube and Common beefed with each other back in the day, but of course, they have buried the hatchet since then. If you don't know about this beef, look it up. It's highly documented, but ultimately, it was all just a big misunderstanding. But it was a sight to behold watching them two share the screen together, and they worked well with each other. But as far as Common in the movie, he is married to Eve, which I'm low-key upset that Michael Ealy wasn't in the movie because it is a slap in the face to his character and his growth in the second film. And there's this whole subplot between Common, Nicki Minaj, and Eve, and how Common is not cheating on Nicki Minaj, and how Eve's character doesn't really appreciate everything Common that he does as a father. The preachy, heavy-handed stuff in the film can get overwhelming at times, but it was still an enjoyable film that I loved and had a good time with, and I will say the second best Barbershop film because it had just the right balance of what was a continuation of the series set in a modern-day setting, given 2016 was 6 years ago. I gave Barbershop the next cut the hard eyes emoji. So in conclusion, there has not been any further plans for the Barbershop series, and I'm okay with that. In fact, as far as Ice Cube goes, I want to see another Friday movie, if possible, but like I said, the first Barbershop is just as important to Ice Cube's career as Friday. This franchise has had its ups and downs, but it's had more highs than lows, thankfully. And it will remain a staple within the black culture as far as movies go. Here is a recap of my rating of every Barbershop plus Barbershop related movies. And this is how I rank the Barbershop films. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Bankfold B. Stay safe, wash your hands, peace.